professor of history at Springfield College and Virginia College in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'm also the author of this book, True Stories of Black South Carolina, which contains the following story that's very important in not only the history of Charleston, South Carolina and of African Americans, but in American history in general. If you ever visit Charleston, you'll find that on the city's west side, in the middle of the street, on the corners of Ashley Avenue and Fishburne Street, you will find what is known as the hanging tree. There is a photograph of it, and as you'll see, it kind of divides the street. Now, that tree is of great significance. There's a lot of oral history in Charleston that people who were enslaved were hanged on that tree during the 1700s and 1800s. And some people believe that Denmark Vesey, who was the leader of an unsuccessful slave rebellion in Charleston in 1822, that he and 35 of his comrades may have been hanged there. Well, we don't know that for sure, for the simple fact that the city did not want it known where Denmark Vesey was hanged because they didn't want it to serve as a sort of shrine to Vesey to inspire other people to do as he did. Go figure. But here's what we do know. Back in the 1930s, you had Augustus Lapsim. He was an African American that was employed by the WPA, which was the Works Progress Administration, founded by President Franklin Roosevelt as one of the programs to help people out during the New Deal. And they basically hired unemployed writers, such as Mr. Lapsim, to go out, and one of their projects was to interview former slaves as to their experiences, because by 1937, many of the ex-slaves were dying out, and they wanted to catch these stories before they were forever lost to the graveyards. One of the fascinating stories that he recorded was from a man by the name of Elijah Green. Elijah Green was a slave in Charleston during this period, and he told some really interesting stories about Charleston in the days of slavery, including this that regards to the hanging tree, which goes as follows. He said that the first two people that was hung in Charleston was Harry and Janie, husband and wife who were slaves of Mr. Christopher Black. Mr. Black had them whipped, and Harry and Janie planned to kill the whole family. They poisoned the breakfast one morning, and if two of the family members had not overslept, they too would have been dead. The others died almost instantly. An investigation was made, and the two slaves were hung on that big oak tree in the middle of Ashley Avenue. Now, there's a lot to that story, as brief as it was. It confirms that they were, in fact, people who were hanged on the hanging tree. And secondly, it also shows that in those days you did have considerable resistance to slavery. In spite of the inhumane conditions that these individuals faced, there were some who sought to redress that. Now, but the other thing about this, too, is that the hanging tree in Charleston, there's a lot of controversy over it. There are some people within and without the African American community who believe that the tree should be cut down. That is a terrible reminder of slavery. Well, there are several things to that as far as I'm concerned. It's documented that in the late 1960s, when sometimes during marches, African Americans would start marching from the hanging tree because of its importance to history. And the second thing to consider is as follows. Rod Serling, the producer of the popular Twilight Zone show back in the 1960s, which still airs on many stations today, had said something that really relates to that. As a Jewish American, Mr. Serling was very concerned about the concentration camps and Hitler and the Nazis and how they tried to destroy the Jewish people. He fought in World War II literally against that. And this is what he had to say about the concentration camps in a speech that he made in the 1960s, as follows. The Dachau's, the Belsens, the Buchenwalds, the Auschwitzes, all of them, they remain standing because they are a monument to a moment in time when some men decided to turn the earth into a graveyard. Into it they shoveled all of their reason, their logic, their knowledge, but worst of all, their conscience. And the moment we forget this, the moment we cease to be haunted by its remembrance, then we become the gravediggers. Something to dwell on and remember, not only in the Twilight Zone, but wherever men walk God's earth. In other words, monuments like the hanging tree should stay. as a reminder of what happened, so that it will never, so even though it happened once in our history, it should never happen again. This is Damon Fordham talking about the hanging tree in Charleston.